Good morning, Stop the War Coalition. I'm very sorry I can't be at the annual meeting today. And that's because I'm in Spain, because we had a very interesting meeting yesterday, which was about peace and peace in the Ukraine and peace around the world. It was hosted by Podemos, but had representatives of 10 different countries present, from peace, anti-war, anti-nuclear, and left organizations all across Europe. And it was a fascinating discussion. Everyone there condemned the war in Ukraine. Everyone there condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the destruction that's gone on. But everyone there also wanted us to look for peace, a peaceful outcome, use the language of peace, and were cautiously welcoming that Antonio Guterres at last has written to both President Zelensky and President Putin to ask to meet them both to try and negotiate an urgent ceasefire. All wars end in negotiations. All wars end with some kind of agreement. Why don't we stop the fighting and go straight onto that phase now? So many people have died already in this terrible conflict. And the longer it goes on, more people are going to die as a result of it. And so it is important that we make our voice heard on this and call for peace, but also for a long-term settlement that does ensure there is security for people to be able to live in Russia and in Ukraine, and that no more people die, no more conscripted soldiers die, and that this war is brought to a swift conclusion. The Stop the War Coalition was founded not to oppose the Iraq War, because at that time the Iraq War hadn't even been thought of. It was to oppose the war in Afghanistan in 2001. I remember it very well. I was part of the organization that set up the Stop the War Coalition. We said that to let slip the dogs of war, those are the words used by Bruce Kent and others, would bring incalculable problems, both to the people of Afghanistan and the people of the wider world. It gives me no pleasure at all to say here we are, 21 years later this year. Afghanistan, now probably the poorest place on the face of this earth, probably the place with the most hunger of any country on this earth, and probably the place with the most desperation. I have constituents from Afghanistan who've got family there, who can't travel, can't get out, and are suffering very, very badly. So all that stuff we were told by Tony Blair and by George Bush and plenty of others, that the Afghan war was about nation building and about developing a new society. What have we achieved other than the expenditure of billions, the loss of tens of thousands of Afghan lives, and of course the loss of Afghan soldiers, American soldiers, British soldiers, and so many others? After that, we had the Axis of Evil speech by George Bush in 2002. This ludicrous speech, which said that Iraq was an ever-present threat. Some of us challenged that at the time. Stop the War Coalition led the way in opposition to the war. Sadly, despite a huge effort and a very big parliamentary revolt and the biggest ever demonstration in Britain's history, the Iraq War went ahead. And what have we left behind? What have we left behind? Other than grieving families for dead soldiers and instability going on and on. That is the price of war. It doesn't go away on the day that the troops leave. It lives on in the mental health stress of former soldiers. It lives on in the poverty of the people. And it lives on in the profits of the arms manufacturers that sold all those weapons, allegedly to destroy Iraq's non-existent weapons of mass destruction. To any politician that's thinking of the next conflict, I would require them to read the Chilcot report on what really happened and how those decisions were made. And so it is about recognizing what happens. From Ukraine, probably 4 million people have now fled. That is 10% of the entire population. The equivalent British 10% would be 6.5 million people leaving the country if a war broke out. They've gone to Poland, they've gone to Romania, they've gone to Moldova, they've gone to Slovakia, they've gone to Germany. A very small number have come to Britain because the Home Office has created a whole miasma of bureaucratic obstacles to prevent people coming, whilst at the same time claiming to be welcoming Ukrainian refugees. They're all people that are desperate. They're all people that need help and support. And it's wonderful that they are getting a lot of popular sympathy and popular support, and quite right too. They have my absolute sympathy and support for everything they've been through. And I hope, obviously, there's a ceasefire, and at some point people will be able to go back and rebuild in an atmosphere of security. But I just point out that at this very moment, it's not the only war going on in the world. There are 40 conflicts going on around the world, some well known, some less well known. But if I just quote one or two more, the war in Yemen has created a humanitarian and environmental disaster in Yemen, as the bombing has destroyed hospitals, schools, roads, transport infrastructure, ports, and left people hungry. It's also left people desperately ill from cholera and other wholly preventable conditions and diseases. And where did those weapons come from that are bombing Yemen? Supplied largely by Britain and also by the United States and others to the UAE and to Saudi Arabia to take part in the bombing of Yemen. At last, there is a temporary ceasefire. One hopes that can be converted into a ceasefire and a long-term settlement. And one hopes there can be a resurrection of the nuclear agreement with Iran, and we can begin to look to bring long-term peace in the region. But all this time, Britain has been the pen holder on bringing about a resolution in Yemen. So why the delay? What was holding them up? What was the problem? Other than this very close relationship with BAE Systems to sell arms to Saudi Arabia. And so when Boris Johnson goes to Saudi Arabia and asks for oil, the same day 50 people were executed, the week before 80 were executed, and the government tries to tell us that human rights is improving in Saudi Arabia. Why is it improving? Because they want to buy oil from them. Well, I think we need to think through a bit more carefully the totality of our foreign policy. But the war in Yemen creates refugees. The occupation of Palestine creates refugees. The war in Syria creates thousands of refugees, as does the war in Libya. Those people all need somewhere to live. So if our media were a bit better at reporting the totality of conflicts and the human cost of conflicts, I think we'd all be a lot better off. I want all possible rights for every Ukrainian refugee. I also want all possible rights for refugees from Yemen, Syria, Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, because they're all human beings looking to make their contribution to our world, to our planet. The next few months are going to be very difficult for many poor people across North Africa and the Middle East. The price of grain has already gone up. Exports from Russia will be banned in many places or not possible, and there'll probably be a lowering of production even from Russia and certainly from Ukraine. So we're looking at bread shortages in the very near future. We're looking at massive increases in oil, petrol, and gas prices as a result of this war. Governments could intervene and cap the price and stop the profiteering on energy, or they can just let the prices rip and the profits roll in for those very big companies. So it is a question of how governments behave. The last thing I want to say is this about our activities and Stop the War. We are what it says on the tin. Stop the war. We don't support wars. We don't want wars. We want an understanding of how a war breaks out and how peace can come. The war in Ukraine has something very dangerous, a cloud hovering around it. And it's that cloud is the danger of nuclear war, because you have obviously a heavily nuclear armed state in Russia. We also have nuclear arms held across the whole of Europe, including Britain. There are 1,800 nuclear warheads primed for use at any one time. Even a tactical nuclear weapon will kill hundreds of thousands of people. A full-blown nuclear war could end life on Earth. And so when the UN General Assembly voted for a nuclear weapons ban, a global ban on nuclear weapons, Britain and the other declared nuclear weapon states all opposed it, as did the other nuclear weapon states, North Korea, India, Pakistan, and Israel. We have to end nuclear weapons. And in June, ICAN, International Campaign for the Abolition of Nuclear Weapons, and a number of other organizations are coming together in Vienna at the time that the Global Weapons Treaty is going to be debated. I'll be there supporting them in their campaigns and supporting the alert of the danger of nuclear war and nuclear proliferation, and support for the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. So we have a lot of work to do to convince public opinion of the dangers of war, convince public opinion that it is not a solution to any of our problems, and to understand. And if we just spend more and more on arms and weapons, develop even bigger alliances all over the world, then other people spend more and more and develop bigger and bigger alliances. If you want to know where this leads to, I suggest people read a wonderful book by Adam Hochschild, written about the descent into the First World War, and the way a series of often secret interlocking defense agreements suddenly came into play, and we ended up with millions of workers of Britain and France killing millions of workers of Germany and other places, because that's what wars do. So thank you to Stop the War Coalition for being around all these years. I never thought we'd still be around more than 20 years after we were founded, but it looks like we're going to have to stick around for a very long time, because we are going to be that democratic voice in all our diversity to stop war and unite people for peace. And so when we're under attack, let's put our arms around each other and just go out and argue for peace. Thank you, Stop the War Coalition. Again, my apologies, I can't be present at the meeting today.